In the early to mid-2000s, Spider-Man was on the mind of every moviegoer, Spider-Man 1 being one of the highest-grossing movies of 2002, and Spider-Man 2 being the same in 2004. Naturally, all eyes were on Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3, a movie that, like Spider-Man 2, sought out to be bigger, badder, and better than its predecessor in terms of visual effects and storytelling. However, things didn't go exactly as planned. When it was released in 2007, Spider-Man 3 was one of the most hyped-up superhero movies of its day, with a massive marketing campaign showing that this time we were getting Sandman, Harry's gonna be the Goblin, Peter's gonna get the black symbiote suit, and Venom will appear in it as well. People were really excited for this movie. In fact, I remember a kid in my kindergarten class told me his dad was picking him up early from school so they could go see Spider-Man 3. It was really funny when his dad showed up for his doctor's appointment later that day. Hope they had fun. But that's just a side tangent. Despite the hype, despite all the fan favorites in the story, Spider-Man 3 turned out to be one of the biggest disappointments in the history of superhero movies. And this is coming after the year we got both X-Men: The Last Stand and Superman Returns. So that is saying quite a lot about Spider-Man 3. The film remained an infamous subject matter for years to come, as we didn't even get Spider-Man 4. The franchise just got rebooted into The Amazing Spider-Man in 2012. Although that isn't Spider-Man 3's fault, that's a much different story. The release of the also divisive The Amazing Spider-Man 2 in 2014 changed the conversation, as that film was now in question as the worst Spider-Man movie, when before Spider-Man 3 was just a shoo-in for that. With Gen Z entering the discourse in the late 2010s, Spider-Man 3 has been gradually rehabilitated as it has many unironic fans. But that begs the question, where do I stand in that mix? I love Spider-Man 3, and I basically always have. However, I think the movie is fundamentally flawed, and to explain that, you have to go back to the beginning. Spider-Man 3 naturally set out to be bigger than Spider-Man 2, but when is a movie too big? Going off the ending of Spider-Man 2, Harry Osborn has to be a goblin-type villain in Spider-Man 3. But the team also wanted to test out Sandman, thinking he'd make for great visuals, and they were right. To emulate the right kind of sand, they did a plethora of tests to base the look off of, pulling off some of the best CGI the trilogy had seen. In general, Spider-Man 3 is the most visually impressive of the series, as should be expected on a budget that rose to $350 million. The practical effects team were at the top of their game, creating interesting new set pieces involving all the villains they got to work with, and like the previous Spider-Man movies, it's a joy to watch and discover just how much work went into each and every shot. Like the fact that this pipe opening scene was a real thing they had to test out for months on end before actually putting it in the movie. As I was saying, Sandman is the villain that is in the movie, as is Harry Osborn, but the producer, Avi Arad, believed the fans were owed a big screen appearance from the fan favorite Venom, who was a more recent character compared to Green Goblin or Doc Ock. But the introduction of Venom also meant the symbiote alien had to be introduced as well. This is where Spider-Man 3 fundamentally caves in on itself. No movie with the runtime that Spider-Man 3 had can juggle this many distinct storylines. Every single plot point in Spider-Man 2 is related to the theme of Peter not being able to lead a double life, and while most of all plot points in Spider-Man 3 relate to the theme of pride gone too far, the amount of storylines is far greater and the connection between them is almost non-existent. The gist of Spider-Man 3 is that everything's going really well for Peter and Spider-Man for the first time in his life, and because of this, he becomes really self-absorbed, at the expense of his relationship with Mary Jane, who's going through a rough patch in her career. Meanwhile, Harry's out for revenge for Peter killing his father, but quickly gets beat and becomes an amnesiac. While Peter is then confronted with Flint Marko, a crook that got caught up in an accident that turned him into the Sandman. Marko is also the true killer of Uncle Ben, and the other guy was an accomplice. Earlier in the story, the symbiote alien crashed from out of the sky and attached itself to Peter's bike, and then latches onto him when he's enraged by the news of Uncle Ben's true killer still being out there, giving him the black suit, which heightens all of his powers as well as all of his most repressed negative emotions. At the same time, Eddie Brock is a new photographer at the Daily Bugle who's competing with Peter Parker to get the staff job by getting photos of Spider-Man. And that only scratches the surface of how many character dynamics are in play throughout Spider-Man 3. And like I said, the movie just does not have the space for all of it. Remember how I said Harry gets amnesia for a certain period of the film? When watching the movie, it's impossible to see that as anything other than a desperate need to get the villainous Harry out of the story for an hour so we can set up other plot lines without having to worry about what effect Harry is going to have on the plot. The same thing is done later when Spider-Man tries to kill Sandman. In the long run, it just comes off as an attempt to get him out of the story so we can go back to focusing on Harry as the villain because he got over his amnesia at roughly the same time. So during its first two acts, Spider-Man 3 is just tossing the main plot back and forth between several seemingly unrelated elements, and fundamentally it doesn't work as a story. Which is why Spider-Man 3 was, in a way, doomed from the start to be the worst in the trilogy because it doesn't have the concise storytelling from Spider-Man 1 and 2. However, I think focusing on two villain plots and showing how the black suit changes those dynamics is a fine approach for the story. I think the whole thing really falls apart once Venom enters the plot. Watching this movie, it really doesn't even make sense to me what Avi Arad was thinking. Okay, so the fans want Venom in a movie. So the solution is, instead of giving him his own movie where he's the main villain to flesh out his story, we're going to attach the character to Spider-Man 3 when there are only 25 minutes left before the movie's over? It's just such a half-hearted solution to the Venom demand that took a lot of effort to make. If the movie merely introduced Eddie and used his becoming Venom as a sequel hook for Spider-Man 4, then I think Spider-Man 3 would have been much better for it, as by the time Venom's introduced an hour and 40 minutes in, you've already been through an incredibly convoluted plotline littered with different villains, alien costumes, retcons, and romantic melodrama. Which is a shame because I do like Topher Grace as Eddie Brock. Yeah, I mean it. In fact, I think all the villains give great performances in this, Thomas Hayden Church being the sympathetic villain for Sandman, and James Franco being insanely hammy as the New Goblin. But to focus on Edward Brock Jr., I think he's just so fun to watch as this obnoxious, fake, pretentious douche. Someone who always talks themselves up as a super important and talented figure and talks down on the skills of other people.
See, photography, it's not just about, no offense, flagpoles, whatever. It's about lighting, composition, drama.
While being nothing but a lying fraud at the end of the day. The kind of person who, when going for forgiveness, is still pointing fingers.
I want you to kill Peter Parker.
Watching a character like that get taken down is always entertaining in my opinion, and this one is no different. But like I said, Venom just has a remarkably poor showcase in this movie because of the fact that the story was already crammed to begin with and he only makes it worse. And it's a shame that problems that were foisted upon Sam Raimi by the higher-ups are the things that define this film, and, like Joel Schumacher's Batman and Robin, would forever stain the careers of these creatives for things that weren't really their fault. Because freaky internet nerds just didn't know where criticism of a superhero movie ended and real people began. From the bottom up, Spider-Man 3 was made by the same passionate, hardworking, and creative crew that did the last two, but it just didn't resonate with the audience this time. Despite that, Spider-Man 3, like the second film, has an alternate cut to enjoy, one that wasn't released for a whole 10 years following the release of the film. This is Spider-Man 3, the editor's cut. This is how I watched the movie for the video, and I would say it's overall better than the original, but if you outright dislike Spider-Man 3, I can tell you now it won't change your mind. But it just lands better than the theatrical cut via the scenes that were added. Like this one with Sandman turning into a sandcastle when his daughter's at the park. That's a good character moment, one that probably would have been in the movie if they didn't have to compromise the story to make room for 3 villains. The ordering of scenes has changed, placing the street strut scene after the fight with Harry as opposed to being after Eddie gets fired like it was in the theatrical cut. Which I think works better in the editor's cut because it serves as a drastic tone shift like the music montage in Spider-Man 2 did. The new cut features other scenes that weren't included, alternate takes, and so on. They removed this scene with Aunt May that came near the end of the movie, which I think was a mistake. Aunt May serving as Peter's moral compass was pretty consistent throughout the trilogy, like earlier in this very movie where she tells Peter that Spider-Man doesn't kill people, and that we don't get to decide who lives and who dies. I personally believe she knows Peter's Spider-Man following the bank fight in 2, so little speeches like that make a lot of sense if you look at it like that. So when he's at his lowest point at the end of this movie, it only makes sense to have that scene with her in there. Besides that, I think the editor's cut is without question the definitive version of Spider-Man 3. If only because of this scene here. Peter asks Harry to help him fight Venom and Sandman to save Mary Jane, and he says no, but decides to go back and do it anyway. In the editor's cut, he simply goes over to a table and sees a smashed photo of him alongside Peter and MJ. He can clearly see that trying to avenge his father has cost him everything, even his friends, and decides to help save the day. It's so much more meaningful that way and ties into the themes of pride and revenge and forgiveness really well. Harry's reason for turning good and helping Peter in the theatrical cut is absolute nonsense. Harry's butler decides to tell him right at the end that Spider-Man didn't kill his father, Norman died from the Goblin Glider, and with that knowledge, he turns good again. Like, really? That was the only bit of information Harry needed to call off the mission to kill Spider-Man and be friends again? It just begs the question of why he didn't tell Harry that before, especially when Harry was set on becoming the new Goblin. Shouldn't Harry have realized that his dad died in what you might call a work-related fatality the second he discovered his father was the Green Goblin and had a secret goblin lair inside the mirror? It's just terrible writing and comes at the end of the movie where a lot of the conflicts are caused by people just not talking to each other, so it's the final nail in that coffin. But having said all of that, Spider-Man 3 is, as the title suggests, a movie I can't help but love. And that reason is twofold. First is quite simple. The movie, like the others, is really funny. I haven't mentioned it up to this point, but meme culture is practically what the Raimi Trilogy is known for these days, taking lines like,
"You know, I'm something of a scientist myself,"
and making them really funny even though nothing funny is being said in a vacuum. Spider-Man 3 has produced an entire genre of memes entirely on its own. Just type Bully Maguire into the YouTube search bar and you're bound to have a good time. The comedy value's off the charts when watching this movie, as are the production values, which I went into earlier in the video. But the main reason why I still enjoy Spider-Man 3 even as an adult is because of its themes that are very relatable. Maybe not to as wide of an audience as the story of Spider-Man 2, but let's get into it. Spider-Man 3 is a story about vanity and ego. Peter begins to lose himself in all the hype surrounding Spider-Man to the point where he neglects all of his relationships. Not because he's busy, but because he sees everything through the filter of how great it is to be Spider-Man now that he can't properly empathize with what Mary Jane's going through as she loses her job on Broadway. His relationship with Mary Jane falling apart, as well as his resurfaced anger and guilt over the death of Uncle Ben, are the perfect plot points to center a movie involving the black suit around. This was always in Spider-Man 3, but I think the editor's cut makes it especially clear that the black suit is an allegory for addictive behavior. When everything is starting to go wrong for Peter, we get these scenes of him sitting in the dark as he ultimately decides to go back to the one thing that makes him feel good, the black suit. However, the high is short-lived as he looks like shit whenever he's done with it. I especially love this scene where he goes to the suit and it's breathing when he opens the chest. The suit is alive and it's taking control of Peter's life, changing how he acts and heightening his worst impulses and emotions, like freaking out on Mr. Dickovich over the door not working right.
You'll get your rent when you fix this damn door!
Or flat out gleefully trying to kill the Sandman, allowing him to project peak confidence while coming off like a complete and total moron. When I write this, I wonder if it's really there or if I'm just looking too deep into it. However, I know for a fact that they wanted to tell a story about the painful effects of pride with this movie, and I think looking at the black suit as like an addictive substance for Peter that gradually destroys his life only heightens the message. As I said, Spider-Man 2 could speak to a wide variety of young adults in the audience with its story, and when looking at Spider-Man 3 through this lens, it's more specific in its message. However, these scenes of Peter angrily contemplating all the negative things in his life before just going back to the suit speaks to me. It reminds me of what my life was once like, as I used to dole out negativity with junk food only to feel like shit afterwards, and then project like you're doing super well otherwise. I have been this person.
But, I'm fine. I don't need your help.
I've been this person. I've even been this unrelenting jackass, quite literally. I don't like to talk about this sort of stuff often because I feel kind of weird to humanize myself towards an audience of people who mostly don't know what I even look like, especially if those things are unflattering or negative, but in this case I felt it was warranted. I just know what this movie is going for as someone who's felt almost every emotion they try to give Peter throughout. Because in 2021 I finally did manage to put it all behind me and I'm currently living my best life for it. For those who care to know that, that is. Of which, I know there are many in the audience, which is why I feel encouraged to share this kind of stuff because we all have our own story to tell, and the fact that on previous videos, people have felt impacted by my words enough to share their own stories is something that positively impacts me. Maybe this is a massive tangent from the subject of Spider-Man 3, but for me, it's all connected. The second most major theme of Spider-Man 3 is forgiveness and empathizing with those who have hurt us. What makes this version of Peter such an endearing character for me is that he knows by the end that even though he could blame the symbiote for all the shit he's done in this movie, he instead realizes that those were his actions and owns up to it.
I've done terrible things too.
And seeks forgiveness from those people. Peter even forgives the Sandman for what he did to Uncle Ben, summing up the whole movie in this final monologue.
Whatever comes our way, whatever battle we have raging inside us, we always have a choice.
This specific theming is what allows Spider-Man 3 to resonate with me so much. I can't say it will work for everyone. I can't say the movie doesn't have flaws because from a storytelling perspective, Spider-Man 3 is quite a mess. But because the people who made it put their best foot forward as much as they did, and because of how much its themes resonate with me, in addition to the entertaining action spectacle, I'll always enjoy Spider-Man 3 for what it brings to the table and always rewatch it with no questions asked when revisiting the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. For a pretty decent amount of time now, I've tried to tailor my videos around my experiences with the various subjects I cover. When people repeatedly ask me how I can just ignore all the numerous plot holes in various games or other things I give praise to, all I can say is, with ease. Yeah, I have no problem ignoring that it doesn't make sense for Doc Ock to toss a car at Peter when he doesn't know Peter's Spider-Man. I don't give a damn. Simply put, I'm no longer the nitpick collector, plot hole exposing guy. It's a boring ass and stupid way to discuss media. I've no problem talking about that stuff and the effect it has on a story. See my TMNT series for proof of that. But when I have fun with the thing at hand, I'm just making discussion rather than seriously measuring something's worth based on how many logical inconsistencies I can poke into it, because you can do that for almost any story if you really wanted to. If the themes resonate with me, the characters are ones I enjoy, all that good stuff, I'll discuss the flaws like I have in this very video. But hey man, I enjoyed it. Sorry for yet another tangent, but I figured I'd get it off my chest how much nitpick culture has wrecked discourse on so many things. Beyond that, though, I really don't have much else to say here. I think this video could have been more in-depth, maybe, but I'm hearing my audience loud and clear. The superhero movie thing has never really worked, and it's probably going to stay that way, so we're just gonna stop doing it here. So therefore, I decided to keep my thoughts on this movie pretty brief. I considered just skipping past this video and doing something else, but I figured I'd close out this series by tackling Spider-Man 3 because I said I was going to do it, and once I start something, I do like to finish it regardless of how many people are watching. I do thank those who do watch and enjoy all my videos, though. Now, I'm just looking ahead towards the next project, which I'm very excited to dive back into. But until that time, I'll say the same thing I always do. Thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you next time.